What is up, YouTube? Scottoria here to talk about the new official Path of Exile League, Echoes of the Atlas, the new Challenge League ritual that was just announced today in their teaser stream on Twitch. I'm personally incredibly excited about this new league. They're adding a bunch of new content into the game. This video, we're going to be showcasing everything they announced. We're going to be talking a little bit about each and every one of the new things that they're going to be adding or changing, etc. As well as over the next few days, we're going to be putting out videos about, more information that they put out, as well as our analysis on it and how that's going to affect our overall gameplay when the new league launches. So if you haven't already, guys, make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe button if you enjoy my content and would like to see more content over the next few days. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive straight into this this new teaser. So here's our table of contents. We're going to discuss all of these new topics that were introduced during the teaser today. If you would like to jump ahead to any particular topic, I will have the timestamps in the description down below, so that way you can jump straight over to it and check it out. First, let's talk a little bit about the new expansion itself being added into the game, Echoes of the Atlas, which we are going to dive a little bit into the mechanics of what we currently know about it. Now, from my understanding, whenever you're into maps, you eventually get greeted by Maven, who's like the in-game main boss. I'm not really sure what she is or what role she plays in the lore yet. But this is the arena right here. And as you're completing maps, you will encounter her. Now, she's going to watch your fight with whatever particular map boss you're fighting against. And I guess she sort of essentially captures that essence of that boss or whatever. And then you eventually get an invite to this arena where you fight those same bosses. Now, off the top of my head, I forget what the amount of bosses is as it progresses, but there is in fact a progression toward your end game goal of 10 bosses at a time, which is repeatable once you hit that point. The amount of bosses leading up to that is going to be sort of in a quest line format, similar to what we saw during Heist League, where you had those like quest line contracts that you couldn't trade or get necessarily, do anything with other than just complete. Similar workings. I think it's like 2, 4, 6, and then up to 10. And then as you get those invites to go fight them into the arena, then you progress toward the next one. And then once you reach 10, I guess that's actually one of the tradable options you're going to have at that point. That'll be your repeatable end game encounter with her, where you eventually get the invite to actually fight Mavis herself, in which she drops some pretty interesting items, which we're going to talk about a little bit more in a little bit deeper into this video. Now going into it, I'm really excited about this mechanic. It will play alongside our Sirus endgame content as we're progressing the Atlas itself. You do end up getting to choose which bosses you want to put into this arena and then eventually combat. And I guess there's going to be some sort of meta involved. We don't know it yet, but my assumptions and my predictions for this particular mechanic, we're going to develop and see which bosses are better for taking to the arena and having synergized during this fight. He did not say that there would be, and it didn't feel like there would be any sort of like particular perks from fighting certain bosses over other bosses, other than just ease of the fight itself. However, that's not to say that there might be. So once we start getting more information about this particular encounter itself, we'll have a little bit more better idea as to what the proper meta is going to be, as to which bosses we want to take into this 10 boss fight arena and really capitalize on. So without further ado, let's go ahead and hop into the next section. So this next section, we're going to talk a little bit about changes to the Atlas itself, as well as some of the changes they made toward like completely new content being added into the game itself when it comes to the Atlas. Now, this is something I'm personally really excited about. I've always been a really big fan of just grinding maps and working maps from back in the days when you're making like Elder Rings and really trying to leverage it toward your end game goals and what it is you're trying to farm. Now, as you can see here during this teaser trailer, there's actually kind of like an ascendancy tree for the Atlas for each particular region. Now, let's go ahead and pause right here so we can kind of get a brief overview of Glenart Cairns. Now, this one is in particular to Beyond. Now, what's interesting about this is each region has their own ascendancy tree in which you kind of sort of specialize towards specific types of encounters in that region. So let's say We were doing tropical islands and obviously delirium, similar to how everyone was doing during Heist. And we really want to juice up our beyond encounter that we're doing. We're doing double beyonds or et cetera, et cetera. This is where you're able to actually path into various ascendancy nodes that are going to be available for that region. Now, obviously, whenever a new league comes out and they kind of rework the atlas as to where maps are, and when it comes to different regions and stuff, I don't know what's going to be in Glenart Cairns, especially since there are going to be new maps and tile sets introduced into the game, which we're going to talk about a little bit later in this video. But there's also different ones too, such as Incursion, where you can actually follow a ascendancy tree to really juice out your Incursion encounters, your Legion Monolith encounters, which is going to be something really spicy, and which is going to synergize really well with some of the crafted Watchstones we're going to have available to us too, which we're also going to talk about a little bit later, guys. So please stay tuned. But as you can see, each one is going to have its own kind of sort of specialty toward that region. And then Chris Wilson did sort of say, from my understanding during the Q&A portion, that each region will have a separate one. So like, from my understanding, I could be wrong yet, this is the first day they announced it, and this is what I've gathered during the Q&A portion, is so Glenart Cairns, if we choose Incursion specialty, I guess you could call it, in that region, I don't know if you can actually use that in a different region yet. But the way he was talking, it sounded as though like you'll have Legion in this region, and you'll have Beyond juiced out in this region, etc., etc. Based on former leagues and the way GGG sort of develops some of their league mechanics, it would make a lot of sense for that to happen. That way they sort of spread the wealth, if you will, as well as it also kind of gives you a unique opportunity to kind of spread out as to what it is you're farming. So if you're really wanting to do your harvest thing, as you can see here, as that being one of the options to really juice out your harvest mechanics, which is something we're going to talk about a little bit later, and how they're going to be implementing that into the game. You can have harvest in this region. So if you want to start focusing on that, you have everything already juiced out, and you won't have to respec elsewhere to really do that. Now, about respecing, he did say there are going to be special currency for respecing your tree in each region. So if you are unhappy with your choices, you are able to manipulate that and change it accordingly. He didn't really give an exact estimate as to how expensive or how rare some of these orbs are, or the currency going to be needed in order to respec these trees. However, he did say it could fluctuate based on the current metagame upon release and how the current player base is playing it. Are they kind of pathing into nodes that'll help them in the short term and then regularly respecing in the long term? Or are they invested in those long-term investments early and then going toward those and not really needing those respec points, which would in turn make the prices for those orbs go down? So without further ado, let's hop into this next section. In this next section, we're going to be talking about the Craftable Watchstones, which we briefly spoke about in this last section. I'm personally really excited about these. This is something that I actually hadn't really thought about until they brought it up in this teaser about how valuable this could be when it comes to forging your atlas, especially the synergy when it comes to the new ascendancy tree for your atlas. You're actually going to have craftable watchstones available to you, and they will actually drop, and this is confirmed from Chris Wilson during the teaser, that you can actually get these watchstones while you're currently progressing the atlas before reaching Awaken 8. So theoretically speaking, you can actually reach Awaken 8 faster than you would like in the older progression ways of getting the different watchstones, if that makes sense. There are rare, very rare drops, but it can still occur. Now, these watchstones, when you craft them, could have juiced out things for Legion or Beyond buffs, etc. Like I said before, they're fairly rare to obtain. As you can see here, Legion encounters in areas have 26% increased chance to include a Maraketh army. That's actually incredibly good odds. Imagine 26% chance to get a Maraketh roll in a Legion encounter and then be able to just chain maps. Your odds at a 26% chance is very strong, especially if you're using things like Legion Scarabs, etc., etc. So as the league comes out, and we're starting to see the different ways people are crafting these and obtaining them, I'm really excited about. So without further ado, let's hop into the next one, which is going to be the Maven's Orb. Now, we don't have a special slide for this one because this is pretty brief. From my understanding, the new endgame boss, Maven, has a % chance of dropping this orb upon defeat. Now, Chris Wilson said during the teaser that the odds of you getting this orb during the fight is about the same as the Awakener orb whenever we defeat Sirus. So the odds are fairly about the same. It's not going to be uber rare, but it'll be obtainable for more of that end game crafting and that higher end like min-max portion of it. Now, from my understanding, the Maven's Orb, I guess we can just read it, removes 1 influence modifier from an item with at least 2 influence mods and upgrades another influence modifier. Upgraded modifier, the highest tier, transforms the modifier into an elevated modifier. So we're going to see some really wonky crafts being utilized with these orbs. And not only that, guys, but since Harvest is being brought back into this league, I personally am really excited to see some of these new and advanced, enhanced modifiers we're going to see. As you can see, when he hit the Val Regalia, we were able to get +1 to socketed intelligence gems, as well as a % increased int. So this is incredibly powerful if used properly. I'm hoping as the days progress and we get a little bit more information about these orbs, as well as some of the new crafting methods that are going to be implemented and tweaks and turns toward Harvest, we can get another new, a little bit more detailed video on the best uses of these. So I'm really excited about this. Let's go ahead and hop over to the next section as to what they talked about. So this next section is going to be talking about the new maps that they dropped. Now, like I said before in the last section, am an incredibly big fan about like grinding out and farming maps. They're adding 11 new tile sets to the Atlas that they haven't said what they are. They tease as to what they kind of look like. As you can see here, it looks absolutely gorgeous. I personally am excited about it, that with new maps also comes new bosses for those maps. And who knows, maybe these new bosses are going to leverage into that end game, like 10 boss fight in the arena type of deal. That's something we're going to have to take a look at and see. But initially looking at it, 11 new maps is honestly quite a bit. I don't think I've seen that many new maps being introduced onto the Atlas in a long time. So, all right, let's take a look at the next thing. So let's talk a little bit about the new actual challenge league itself, called Ritual. Now, during this new league, I'm actually incredibly excited about. Let's go ahead and hit play so you can kind of get a little bit of a glimpse as to what they showed during the teaser. As you can see, you encounter this ritual during a map where there's a little stone up here at the top, and when you first encounter it, you have to clear out all the mobs within the area inside of it, according to Chris Wilson. And the actual number of mobs that spawn in it directly influence the amount of ritual points you get at the end of this encounter. Now, that's something we're going to talk about here in a second. So it does not favor you to like corral a bunch of mobs over to it and then start the encounter. You just have to go in there, you clear out the mobs, and then you start the encounter. Now, whenever you do start it, it will essentially resurrect or bring to life all the mobs that are supposed to spawn in there, I guess, from my understanding. Pack density, so density and quant for maps do seem to affect it based on the way they were talking during the Q&A portions. So the more juiced out your map is, the more mobs are there, the more that actually inherently spawn within the range of this ritual stone is what we're going to call it. So the more mobs that spawn within the ritual stone area, the more ritual points you get at the end of the encounter. Now, at the end of this encounter, you're going to be offered like a shop, essentially. It's going to give you a bunch of loot that you can spend your points on. So obviously, the more mobs, the more stuff that's inside of this encounter itself, as you can see here. And once you clear them out, you're going to be getting these points in which you can spend on it. From my understanding, you can actually save your points for future encounters and future loot. And there's going to be multiples of these throughout the map. So your initial touch point, let's go ahead and pause here. You're going to get this window where you have, I guess, tribute points. So it looks like this is probably one of the first ones he encountered. You're going to see a bunch of this is actually blocked out right now. So right now, this is what's being offered. This is the points we have to spend on these items. And if you don't like these items, you can either re-roll it, which is not advisable until you've actually seen everything being afforded to you. Or you can just hit, you just continue on with the next one. It says 2 rituals remaining. So there's still 2 more out there. And then once you progress, you'll actually be able to unlock those other slots and see what else is available to you, and then continue to stockpile those tribute points. Now, what's interesting about this is we'll see here. Let's go ahead and fast forward a little bit. So right here, boom. Now that he has everything unlocked, and actually more importantly here, let's go ahead and do it right beforehand. He actually spent some of his points on this. Boom. So it's kind of like putting it on layaway almost, right? So it makes it slightly cheaper. So that way the next time he encounters it, he can then purchase the item. That way it kind of locks that item in there and then saves it for your next encounter, in which you'll be able to then afford that item and then obtain it, which you'll be able to get some pretty high powered stuff. According to the teaser, it actually showed him obtain 4 exalts from one of these, which was kind of nuts. As you can see right here, boom, he'll have that available to him at 2,800, which seems incredibly nuts. I'm sure that's going to be ultra, either that or just a very rare encounter, who knows. But either way, that's the base premise behind it. Now, what's interesting about this mechanic is if you have a particularly juiced out map in which you got an insane amount of tribute points from a particular ritual encounter, you can actually save that into like these ritual stones or these new currency orbs that they're going to be offering. So you bring these orbs in, you have a juiced out map, you actually capture that, and then you'll be able to use it in your map device. So let's go ahead and bounce up a little bit and show where they go ahead and obtain it. These are some of the new items that's going to be offered during these encounters as well. These new bases that are going to be able to be crafted on, which I'm pretty excited about. Initially, off the top of my head, I haven't really thought of some really OP builds utilizing it yet, but here in the near future, I'm really wanting to put together some really juicy videos that'll help us, elaborate on the best uses for some of these new bases. But let's go ahead and bounce up a little bit. All right, so whenever spawning in, actually, okay, here it is. So during this portion, as you can see, blood-filled vessel. This has Oak of the Mighty as the monsters for it. You actually use that in the map device. Now that's going to bring more quant, and it'll actually kind of help juice out to the attribute points you had before on a previous map that you wanted to go ahead and save. Now this is something you can do after your point spending phase, according to Chris Wilson during the teaser trailer. So you're able to, make your informed decision, make your purchases, and then decide, hey, I want to encounter this again. Let's go ahead and save this in my vessel, and we'll take it into a new map. Now, you can only do this to vanilla ones, so you can't essentially generate an infinite amount. So you can't go and juice a map out, get a lot more quant, get a lot more tribute points, and then put that into a vessel and kind of snowball. That's not going to be a thing. It has to be in a map that has not used a vessel on it before in order to then put those monsters into a vessel. If there's any kind of confusion on that, please feel free to hop in my Discord server or comment down below. We kind of talk that out a little bit more. I hope I explained that as best as I could. There's also going to be various new uniques and stuff, which we're going to be talking about here a little bit later in this video. So without further ado, let's go ahead and hop into the next section. So there have been new and improved ascendancies coming into this new league. I actually took a little bit of notes during this portion of the teaser because I'm really excited about some of the initial thoughts and ideas that came with some of the changes they're going to be making. Now, in particular, they made major changes to Deadeye, Inquisitor, and Elementalist as the main 3 focuses. However, they said they made a lot of changes to every single ascendancy as well. Those just happen to be the ones that got the greatest amount of rework. Now, initially going into this, obviously we can't really theory brew too much into what's going to be super OP and what's not until we get patch notes, which is going to be 2 days before the new league starts. So until that time, we can just essentially talk about what we think might do well, and then it completely change here in the next week. So I'm going to keep this relatively brief. As you can see here, we saw a Divine Ire hit. My initial thought processes, and like I said, guys, this could absolutely change once we get patch notes and changes to different skill gems. RF, Righteous Fire builds looked incredibly interesting. I'm going to talk about that in a second. Divine Ire, which we just saw in this video, him using, especially with the changes to the Inquisitor tree. Split Arrow and Barrage are going to be incredibly powerful for bow characters, especially with the new league encompassing a lot of bossing mechanics. The changes to Barrage and some of the bow characters, not necessarily meaning they're going to be OP, but I feel as though they have the potential to be a lot more viable. So as you can see there with the Divine Ire, let's go ahead and jump over to where they actually show the different ascendancies for that. Now, the reason why I actually brought up RF, it's not necessarily because of an ascendancy thing, is because the fact that Harvest is going to be introduced into the game, I actually think it somewhat brings RF back on the map, as well as some of the subtle changes that they made to the skill gem itself, as well as one of the unique boots that we're going to talk a little bit about in this video. Since Harvest is coming back, the only reason why RF was, in my opinion, the only reason why it kind of came back during Harvest is because you can actually craft the staff with it. or wands. You can actually craft the OP gear that you need in order to make it viable. Because without the harvest crafting, without target crafting, it's not it's not really a viable skill to use. But with the new additions to it and the new crafting methods, I actually think it could potentially be something to at least keep an eye on. Like I said, patch notes aren't out yet, so we have no idea. Now, going into the Inquisitor Ascendancy, looking at something like Divine Ire, where we have new mechanics being introduced into the Ascendancy that cause enemies to take more damage while you're standing still, as well as some of the improvements. So here we go, 15% increased damage taken to enemies, or Consecrated Ground applies 15% increased damage taken to enemies, and you have Consecrated Ground while stationary. So that could be an interesting avenue of approach there. Not a whole lot to go on, just my initial looks at it and initial thought processes, as well as when they start talking a little bit more about the Deadeye. Let's go ahead and jump a little bit farther up here. The Deadeye adds a whole bunch of new changes to it, especially with the 2 projectiles being added, as well as the changes to Far Shot being 60% more damage, and then Barrage has no spread. So just initially looking at it, some of the changes they've made to Deadeye, Inquisitor, Elementalist, I'm still a little bit on the fence about. It looks as though they're trying to make multi-elements a little bit more feasible, something like Elemental Hit, or etc. I'm not 100% sure if that's going to make a superior decision over just conversion, but we'll see. I personally love to theory craft, and if you guys have any ideas as to the best ways to leverage the new mechanics being utilized for Elementalist, I would love to hear them. But without further ado, let's go ahead and hop into the next section. During this teaser, they announced new skill gems and support gems. Particularly, they mainly talked only about 2 they really wanted to harp on during this initial presentation. The first one being the skill gem Hydrosphere. Now, what's really interesting about this skill gem is it almost looks like a freezing, like a lightning bolt, freezing pulse type of thing that you actually move around. As you can see here, it's a ball that pushes out water and applies cold and lightning exposure over the duration of time, in which you move across through enemies. And they also added the Trinity support gem, which is trying to kind of promote the use of multi-elemental skills. That way, that's kind of what we were talking about in the last section a little bit more. This could potentially be interesting to use for things like Wild Strike or Elemental Hit or something like that, where you're not necessarily focused on using those jewels, and you kind of work out a creative way of utilizing all 3 to apply exposure, as well as really leveraging elemental weakness to take advantage of some of the reduced resistances that it applies to enemies. So without patch notes and definitive answers about the actual ways these gems are going to really interact in game, I'm kind of curious as to it. So without further ado, let's go ahead and hop over to some of the uniques that's going to be introduced into the new league. So going into the new unique items they're going to be introducing into the game, they teased one in particular that kind of caught my eye, Legacy of Fury, which is really kind of spicy. This kind of plays a little bit into that whole RF idea I had going earlier, where it's applying Scorched Ground while moving. So while you're running around, and being that RF is one of those, like, you got to be close to the enemies type of skills, it applies Scorched Ground, which applies that debuff to nearby enemies. And since you're going to be right on top of them anyway, it's going to really synergize well with that. In my opinion, like I said, in comparison to like some unique or rare boots that you could craft, maybe not so much. Like I said, I haven't POB'd it yet. I haven't really fully thought out, but that was just the initial thought process that went into my head. We also have Black Flame, which is really favoring into more of those unique, fire damage over time type of builds. Once again, kind of going more into the RF type of style, or various other damage over times, particular to Ignite. It looks like one of those uniques that could be cool. I don't really see an initial like, oh, when I need to chase this item type of deal, but it looks pretty spicy so far. And especially with Wither does not expire on enemies ignited by you. That could be kind of interesting, especially with like a self-cast Wither type of situation, but to be honest, I'm not really sure yet. Hand of the Fervent is another one being utilized or introduced into it, where you gain Sacrificial Zeal when you use a skill, dealing 150% of the skill's mana cost is fizz damage per second. Hits overwhelm 11% of fizz damage reduction while you have Sacrificial Zeal. So this is another one of those GGG mechanics where it's kind of a give and take. You have to mitigate the amount of damage you're intaking from utilizing this. Is it going to beat, you know, a good rare pair of gloves, or, you know, a build enabling unique item? I don't really know yet. It's still a little bit early to tell, especially when it comes to some of the other things that Sacrificial Zeal really plays into when it comes to maybe like a mana stacking build or something along those lines. Not 100% sure yet on this one, but this is one of the ones they also introduced into the game, and it could be kind of spicy. It could be exciting to see what people build around it. Without further ado, let's go ahead and hop into the next one. So let's talk about Harvest. It has returned, guys, and boy, am I excited. So Harvest League is probably one of the most controversial leagues, in my opinion, at least one of the most controversial leagues in Path of Exile history. That is because you have players on one hand that love the idea of having a lot of build enabling gear readily available to them through the use of harvest crafting. And you also have a set of players that say this OP mirror tier gear just absolutely too ridiculously easy to obtain and shouldn't be in the game at all. It kind of reduces a lot of that grind aspect behind it. Personally, I'm not saying one is right over the other. I'm just really excited about the interesting way they decided to implement it, which I think sort of appeases both sides of the spectrum. Now, what they're going to do when it comes to bringing Harvest back is you're going to encounter a portal to the Sacred Grove randomly in a map, right? So there's not going to be any more seeds. You're not going to be farming seeds and getting a bunch of them and then trading them, etc. You're not going to build your own garden anymore either. You're not going to have your own garden that you go to. Whenever you encounter this portal, you're actually going to go into a different garden that's going to be already generated and have different options for you to choose from. So you're going to have two, let's say, yellow seed groves growing. You're going to look at each one and see, you're going to only be able to pick one of those to fight the monsters in it. Now you're going to know some of the basic options are going to be available to it. So maybe it'll have life seeds or speed seeds, etc. So you choose that one. The other one diminishes. You fight those monsters and you can save up to 10 crafts. That's important because I know that's one of the things that people were thinking, okay, so there's really no good way for them to be able to properly do this without being able to exploit it and essentially turn into how it was before. Well, being that you're only able to save up to 10 is kind of interesting. It really makes you decide as to which crafts you're going to keep and hold on to for your own personal gear, or if you are going to save it for trading later in the TFT server. So here's kind of an example as to how it's going to look. In this case, it has two different colors. In the video itself, it'll also show him be presented with two yellows, which will have different like mobs and type of seeds that are currently rolled on it. And you're going to choose one of those. So here's the example I was going to show you. So in this case, he picks this one. He gets those particular rolls, chooses it, and that's it. Personally, I really, really like this. I think this is a very safe middle ground to appease the people who loved Harvest and wanted it, the target crafting aspects being introduced into the game, as well as it also appeases the fact that it's not something that's going to be readily and easily available to just everyone constantly, and you really can't leverage it the same way we did during Harvest League, as to the fact that we only get to save 10 of them. I mean, you could still save some really good crafts. You could still make a lot of money doing it, but it's not going to be as super overpowered as possible. It's going to also make you a little bit more cognizant as to what gear it is you're going to be crafting, and you're going to be holding on to, etc. I'm really excited as to the best ways of taking advantage of this. So let's hop into the next thing. So Heist is going core. As already previously announced, they are implementing Heist in this upcoming league. Pretty much similar from my understanding based on what they were saying during this initial teaser. It's going to pretty much operate almost the same way as before. I believe he said starting in Act 6 is when you can start obtaining contracts, etc. to start progressing through your, leveling your rogue system is what's still going to be in there. I didn't catch as to whether or not they were going to still do the quest line series, which I hope they get rid of. I'm not a big fan of having to do the quests that didn't yield really anything other than leading up to the unique contracts. But I wouldn't put it past them to have that still implemented. But this is how we're going to continue obtaining some of those cool, end game like alternate quality gems, etc., as well as the farming methods of the way we use and leverage blueprints. Now, he did address the way blueprints were utilized during Heist League. He wasn't actually, Chris Wilson was not against, not the word duping is not the right word. It's making copies of very valuable blueprints. That's going to continue. However, they're going to be taxed. The way they're going to tax them is whenever you fracture or beastcraft a very valuable blueprint that you have like the parent of, it's gonna what's the word I'm looking for? Veil all of the rooms within that blueprint. So you're gonna have to go through with your rogue markers, I'm assuming they're bringing back, and then unveil all of those rooms again, instead of just revealing everything and then actually fracturing it and having it still revealed. They're gonna essentially add that added tax to it to make it a little bit more costly and balance it that way. But it's all still going to be available. It's going to be in the game. You're still going to be able to do it. It's just going to be a little bit more expensive. Not to say it's not going to be profitable, in my opinion. And this is just initially looking at it. I don't have like a horoscope or anything. I actually think it could be very profitable in the sense that that tax might seem a little bit intimidating to people. So prices on like fractured fossils or beasts might go significantly down as to where they left off in Heist. But like I said, I don't know. I'm really excited to see how that's going to play out. They didn't say anything about trinkets being removed or the OP, 4% that you can get and then just focus on heisting. I'm actually happy that they continued this in the game, as well as being able to have access to some of those endgame gear that you can get at the end of those heists. So, all right, without further ado, those were the main key points of, the overall league. Let's go ahead and step into the office, which I think I have somewhere around here. There we go. If you enjoyed my content, I truly, truly appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day to watch my video. Make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe button down below. Leave a comment if you have any suggestions or ideas or want a theory talk about the new league. I should be having some new videos coming out over the next couple days about theories, about, once we kind of dive a little bit more into the in-depth of what they offer over the next few days. And then ultimately some build ideas. Right now, just initially thought process, without patch notes, I know. My initial thought is of course, Caustic Arrow build, which you could definitely check out that video. Or even a Golemancer, especially with the amount of boss fights that we're going to be kind of focused around. A Golemancer is going to be incredibly powerful, or honestly any summoner, which is usually really powerful. But anyway, appreciate you guys for tuning in. Make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe button, and then follow over on Twitter at Kevin Raisins, or watch my live streams at twitch.tv/Scottoria. All these links are going to be down below. See you guys again very soon.